Klasher coming at you today in Clash Royale. I have returning guests. It's been a while. Woody back on the channel. Woody, how you doing, man?
Howdy, Ash. Thanks very much for inviting me back, man. It's great to be here. Love coming onto the channel to talk with you.
Yeah, dude, we've missed quite a few popularity snapshots, so I apologize, but I'm so excited to get you back on the channel. Between traveling and everything else, we just, didn't cross paths, I should say, the last few months. But we're back at it today, and you released just one or a few days ago now from the time of this this goes live. A card popularity snapshot on Reddit, as you always do, a wonderful write-up, which we're going to quote in a bit here, because you have some really awesome lines, too. But what I wanted to talk about, and by the way, in the background, guys, I will also have the top 50 decks right now as far as win percentage goes for you guys to kind of look over. If you're looking for a deck, maybe you'll find the new option there in the background. Then we'll hop into some replays. So, Woody, tell us a little bit about your big takeaways from this card popularity snapshot. What's winning now? What's not? And, again, what's your observations?
Absolutely. So for those of you who are new to the snapshot, I take a look at the top 200 decks at the end of each season and look at all the cards that are in there, find the most popular decks, and publish it on Reddit. This snapshot is actually super useful because we've had the same metagame for a relatively long time now, and by that I mean the same decks have been kind of dominant and evolving in pretty much the same way. There haven't been any balance changes, there haven't been any major tournaments, so it's kind of all been focused on ladder. So my lessons that I've been learning recently is that Dark Prince is really, really good. The buff that he got in the last round of balance changes has made him extremely powerful. Kind of same thing for Ice Golem. He's kind of become necessary to counter the Dark Prince. And so those two are seen in the top 3 cards in the entire game at the top of the ladder right now. Zap and the Lock have kind of always been there as super versatile, easy cycle cards. But overall, the metagame has shifted toward a bit more kind of mid-range ground-based decks. We've got a lot of giant double Prince decks out there. It's the most popular deck at the top of the ladder. There's still some contention there from kind of Expo Siege decks and other ground-based decks, but I noticed that there's not a whole lot of Lava Hound decks. The flying decks have kind of gone out of vogue. Only a few of them in the top 200 last season.
Yeah, I mean, I guess Botcham, that's about it, right?
Yeah.
But no, there was a few people obviously playing Lava Hound, but, what do you think about the two top archetypes right now being Goizen, or actually just giant double Prince beatdown, sometimes with Fireball as well, and also Bridge Spam? Are you happy with those two archetypes being, that much ahead of the rest, or do you think they deserve some nerfs to kind of set everything in balance again?
I think that it's not necessarily the archetypes themselves that are overpowered, but it's this Dark Prince who has really dictated the entire way that the metagame works. You can see him in the top 2 decks, that giant double Prince beatdown deck and the Battle Ram Control the Bridge Spam deck. I think that they aren't necessarily dominant and because of their own strengths, but just because of this one card kind of making everything get grounded and go into this heavy beatdown mentality. Either that or, trying to counter it with the Bridge Spam setup. It's been nice for Inferno Dragon being able to burn up giants every once in a while, but besides that, yeah, it's kind of all been a little too focused on that. I think that some choice balance changes in the next update could help to alleviate that.
Yeah, absolutely, man. I totally agree with you on Dark Prince, and I kind of want to get into that. Looking at your top 3 cards in terms of appearances, we do see Zap as number 1, Ice Golem number 2, and Princess number 3. So talk a little bit mostly about Ice Golem and Dark Prince. I mean, I personally do think, and I guess the stats would probably back it up in this situation, that Ice Golem is the best card in the game. It's just so versatile and useful for 2 elixir. Do you think that he needs a nerf? I'm almost, Woody, it's one of those things that my brain says nerf, my heart says no, don't touch Ice Golem. He's too good. He's too, I don't know, subtly good. Does that make sense? How do you feel about those two cards, man?
It does. It makes a lot of sense. And I'll tell you, I'm an Expo player right now, so I love me some Ice Golem. But yeah. I gotta agree with you that, yeah, as the number 2 most popular card, a card that has risen more in the ranking than any other card this past season, it's pretty clear that he has got kind of a negative effect on the metagame. Just being so popular is not good for a variety of reasons. It kind of makes the game feel stale if you always see the Ice Golem coming out. He pretty much always gets value because for 2 elixir, he can stop swarms with his Death Splash, and he can also distract some pretty heavy hitters. Even slow troops like P.E.K.K.A. can get drawn to the other lane when you play him. correctly. So yeah, I think that Ice Golem is kind of an issue, but the bigger problem right here is that there's not really an alternative for him, right? The recent nerf to Knight made it hard to play him. The reduction in his hit points made him just slightly less viable than the Ice Golem, and so a lot of people have kind of flocked to the Ice Golem. I'd like to see Knight getting a few of his hit points back, and maybe a small bit of a haircut nerf to the Ice Golem to just kind of dial in back a little bit and bring balance to the Force again.
That is a great point, Woody, and I do think that we kind of agree and kind of disagree. I don't want to see a nerf to Ice Golem, but I do think that if they nerf Dark Prince, and like you said, what was the... Oh, and they buff Knight, I do think the Ice Golem will be put into check a little bit more, because think about it, Dark Prince, another reason why Ice Golem is used so much. Dark Prince and Prince, he can kite to the other lane. It's just really helpful in those situations. So maybe we'll see a happy medium, or maybe he will get nerfed. Maybe he does deserve it. Again, I might be clouded by my heart on this one as well. So Dark Prince, I mean, everybody pretty much uniformly agrees that he does need some sort of a nerf. What would be your recommendation on that?
For Dark Prince, I think that he just became a little bit too sturdy in the last update. They made his shield stronger. They just made him bash through these swarms after swarms. Yeah. Basically making log bait on par with the Lava Hound decks at almost zero usage down toward the bottom there. So I think that dialing back his survivability a little bit, either by pulling hit points off of his shield or hit points just off of him, as a unit would be a good call there. He doesn't really need to act as a tank, because I think his role is to bash, brains in and charge real quick.
Yeah, I totally agree with you there. I do want to, taking a step away from the balance changes, we'll get back to that in just a moment here. You have a quote in this write-up, which I absolutely love, and it's true. And you say, Tornado has sucked the life out of most defensive buildings, which can't compete with a spell that can activate your own King Tower. Talk a little bit about the state of NATO in defenses in general, and are you happy? NATO's another card where, just like Ice Golem with me, I like NATO a lot, and I don't want to nerf it into oblivion, because to me, it's one of the most compelling cards to watch. However, there's no denying that it's taking space away from every other defense in the game. How do you feel about that?
Tornado is a super interesting spell, and I love the idea behind it. It's the only spell in the game that can affect your opponent's positioning of troops. I think that it brings a lot of flavor and value to the game, and I like it overall, but I think that it's a little bit too strong right now. And I'll make the case here. Tornado is able to activate your own King Tower and is able to deny a lot of the striker cards in the game, like Hog Rider, the ability to actually get onto the tower. It can also pull Goblin Barrels, it can pull Miner, it can even pull Giant if he's alone onto your King Tower. And that in and of itself has kind of made Inferno Tower and Cannon very low in the rankings, very difficult to get value out of relative to the spell, because not only can you get your own King Tower activated, you can also kind of use it on offense to pull your opponent's defensive troops all together. Yeah. The Tornado Executioner combo is kind of known for being one of the most annoying defensive combos in the game, because there's not a whole lot that you can do if all your troops are clumped together and then a big heavy axis swinging straight through them. So what I'd like to see for Tornado is for it to become maybe even better at dealing with light crowd control, being able to handle goblins and bats, and like small ground and air troops a little better, but not being quite so effective against the single big bodies like the Miners and the Hog Riders and the Giants of the world. I'd like to see it be used on offense more, clumping up troops together to get a good swing in, and not quite so much on defense to get your King Tower activated.
Yeah, there's just something really satisfying when you're the one playing it, and really annoying when you're like going against it, when even like a Princess NATO can like kill like a golem push or something when you have the distraction, when you have like another support card helping out. It's just like, it doesn't feel right sometimes just how powerful it can be. Same thing with XC NATO, of course. But so I kind of agree with you that there probably needs some sort of a rework at the very least. So good take on that. I do want to talk a little bit about Siege right now, because you are the Mortar Mauler, Woody. How do you feel about the state of Expo and Mortar right now in the meta?
Great question. I've actually been kind of switching more toward Expo recently. I do love me some Mortar, but we've kind of found on ladder that the only super viable combo at the top is to play Mortar with Hog Rider. So it's been a little bit of a difficult transition for me trying to learn that archetype. I love the Mortar Swarm concept, but just that 3.5 second deploy time on Mortar, pretty much everyone has already got something down to block it. So I I would love to see a 3-second deploy time for Mortar. I think that it fits well with the fact that it's a quicker, cheaper card than Expo. Expo seems fine to me right now. I think that Expo is actually really well balanced. I love playing it. It's one of the most popular cards in the top of the ladder for win conditions. It's the third most popular deck, the standard Expo Siege deck with Tesla and Archers. There's even a variation out there with Ice Wizard and Tornado. So I think that Expo's in a really good spot. I love playing it right now. I don't think it needs any buffs or nerfs. Mortar, on the other hand, it's just a tiny bit underpowered. It gets paired up and used a lot at the top of the ladder because it's a common win condition. So along with the Royal Giant and kind of Elite Barbarians, it's kind of one of the few cards that a lot of people have access to actually tear towers apart. But unfortunately, it's a little bit too much like Royal Giant and Elite Barbarians, and that it's kind of hard to get value out of at the very top of the game.
Yeah, I totally agree with you. How do you feel about archetypes in general, or cards more specifically, that have very low or relatively low use rates but high win rates? Is that totally okay with you? Because oftentimes we do see, especially at tournament level standard, that is the case with like Expo, and you also see it in some other cards like Hunter, and also previously Cannon card. I'm not so sure about right now in this meta, but you know, there's just cards every now and then that kind of come up, where Magic Archer, another one that, you know, maybe has a high skill cap, low use rates but still high win rates. Is that a healthy area to be for a card?
That's a super healthy area. I love the fact that we have a lot of niche cards out there like Magic Archer and like Hunter that aren't used very often but add a lot of spice. And if players can show that they can use them in the perfect situations, they can get a lot of wins out of them. I think that cards with a low use rate and a high win rate are high skill cap cards that are difficult to get value out of. But if you do find the great situation to use them in, that they're obviously gonna, you know, get you the wins. The ones that have a low use rate and a low win rate ought to be buffed, in my opinion. The ones with a high use rate and a high win rate ought to get nerfed. And the ones with a high use rate and a low win rate are kind of in a weird position. And there aren't a whole lot of those, because if they're not getting wins, people typically don't tend to play it.
Yeah, I agree with you, but like, you know, this wouldn't be a high use rate, low win rate, but relatively speaking, I feel like Hog right now in the meta, and maybe you disagree, is kind of, he still has a healthy win rate, but it's not like up there with the other win conditions, in my opinion. But you're still seeing a lot of people use him because he's so free to play friendly. And that kind of leads me to my next question for you is, do you think that Supercell should pay attention to the free-to-play viability of a card when they're deciding how to balance? So in other words, should Supercell be less apt to nerf a Hog than they would, say, Three Musketeers, which is much more level-dependent, even though they're the same rarity? Might not be the best example, but you gotta get what I'm saying. Should they think twice before nerfing a Hog or a Mortar or something like that?
Yeah, I get what you're saying. I think that it should kind of be in the back of their minds, but it really shouldn't be the most important thing that they're thinking about. I think that the most important thing is, does this card work at tournament standard? Because as this game evolves into an esport, as we see more and more players competing at tournament standard in challenges and in friendly battles, I think that ought to be the golden standard to what the balancing team looks at. I think that in terms of card design, it's really important when they're creating new cards and looking at the current state of what players are using on ladder. That is a really important time to consider the rarity of a card, because you want to have free-to-play win conditions. You want to have win conditions that players can play a long time upgrading cards, or maybe buying cards to get unlocked. I think that it's important to have variety there, but in terms of balancing, look only to tournaments.
Okay. And last, I want to end off with kind of the lightning round like we normally do, and I actually really like this. I picked out 6 cards. Actually, we've already talked about a few of them, so I'm gonna vamp on the spot here, and I want to talk about a few cards that are kind of not super obscure right now, but either popular or not popular. Just get your quick thoughts on nerf, buff, or what we should do with them. So let's start out with Zappies. Zappies is a card that recently saw a pretty unprecedented buff, which allowed it to target air as well as ground, right? And I thought that would actually put it on the scene, but according to your snapshot, it has a whopping 0 appearances. So what do you think about Zappies? They're a cool card, but just not being used.
Zappies is a neat card, and it actually sees quite a bit of tournament play. It just doesn't get very much usage on the ladder. I think the reason for that is that Zappies works well in very slow push, chip damage oriented decks, so they're not necessarily a card that deserves a buff because they are viable in some circumstances. They just kind of are in this weird spot where they don't get play on ladder. I wouldn't really want to see much done to them because unfortunately they're kind of a hard card to play against, and they kind of feel bad whenever your troops get stun locked or getting zap down whenever they don't get a chance to shoot. So Zappy's good, but wouldn't want to really change him much.
Okay, yeah, I mean, you'd think they would be even ideal on ladder just because of the fact that they do really well against Prince stuff, you know, double Prince in Prince meta, but I guess there's better options out there. What about, how do you feel about, okay, here's a card that I love, one of my favorite cards in the game right now, and it never sees action really on ladder, and it seldom sees action in competitive play, and that is Giant Skeleton. You would think he would be so much better, especially with NATO and with the fact that he can totally clog a lane, he can stop siege. He seems like, in theory, he should be an amazing card, yet he's just never practically there. How do you feel about Giant Skelly?
Giant Skelly is a super interesting card, and it's actually really good in 2v2 whenever there's a lot more troops on the board, because you can, like you said, clog up a lane really well. It's just another kind of difficult card, along with Zappies and kind of along with Bomb Tower, to make really good, because if it is really good, it kind of has a tendency to just shut down games, cause a lot of draws, and not really let anyone go hard on offense. Getting a Giant Skeleton onto the tower is a pretty difficult job in and of itself, so I'm not really sure what we could do to make it better. Maybe walk faster or something to get the towers quicker, or have a bigger blast radius for its bomb. I don't really like the idea of just seeing tons of Giant Skeletons wandering around being used on defense, but if there was some way to make them better on offense, I'd love to give it a try.
It could be game breaking. You're right. If like Giant Skeletons everywhere, like it would get old pretty fast. So I think I agree with you there. What about Cannon Cart, man? We mentioned it earlier, but that's kind of a card that again, not seeing a lot of action. The win rates are respectable, but nothing crazy. Is it just a matter of there being a lot of better options at Epic card with 5 elixir cost? I mean, you got Executioner there as well.
It's a pretty tricky, fun card, and it saw some play back when Graveyard was more popular. I think that if you actually saw a little bit of a buff to Graveyard, it would work well there. It's just that Cannon Cart doesn't synergize well with very many win conditions out there. If you're going to run a giant base deck, which Cannon Cart would otherwise work pretty well with, there's a lot of other better options, to get the value out of there. I think that Dark Prince just is a great ground-based support troop for knocking brains in. So I think that he might be kind of occluding the Cannon Cart in usage a bit there, but I would be happy to see a tiny buff, but I think it's better to look at the other cards that it works with and buff them instead. Yeah,
whenever I look at Stats Royale or any other API website, I always see Mirror at the very, 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 very bottom, at on win and use rates, and it can have some little, maybe gimmicky type decks and maybe a little bit of viability as a surprise card in some situations. However, given the state of Mirror having to pay extra for the extra level, how do you feel about it? Is there any way to rework Mirror to make it actually viable, and is that even a good thing?
I think it would be really cool if Mirror were viable. I just don't like how right now it gives kind of that +1 level at the +1 cost. It creates a lot of weird interactions there where, like, if you have a fireball that gets mirrored, it can do a lot of damage, and actually even kill a musketeer or any of those 4 elixir troops. But just the fact that you have to memorize that many more extra interactions makes the card feel weird. It can wind up being a dead card a lot of times if you're not up against a bait deck. It has to have, like, the perfect scenario in order to work. And if you do get a great read on your opponent and what deck they're playing, you can use it to great value, but otherwise, running 3 spells is usually just better off in general. There's very rarely a troop that you need to have 2 of that's worth mirroring. So I'd like to see some rework done to it. I wish that you could remove the +1 cost, but then that creates some strange incentives to play a lot of Ice Spirits or mirror Ice Golems. These cheapo cards would get mirrored a lot, and I don't think that would be healthy for the game. So I'm still kind of uncertain as to what Mirror should look like, but I think that it's better off not being used than being super annoying.
I think I agree with you there, because my fear too is that it would accentuate every card that's annoying, right? Or bait would be out of control or something like that. I just feel like I get worried about Mirror being super viable. But Woody, let me ask you for the final card. Why don't you pick out, if you could pick out any card to buff, or to at least make viable, or maybe to nerf, what would it be? Like, do you have a card that we haven't talked about today that you kind of were like, yeah, I'd like to see that card get a buff?
Yeah, that's a great question. You know, I'm looking through them right now, and I'm thinking that I'd like to see a little bit of a buff for Magic Archer. It's one of those cards, kind of along with Hunter, that could work really well in the right circumstances, but just like doesn't seem to get the value. And I think the fact that he can't one-shot a Spear Goblin is kind of an issue there. You see a lot of Spear Goblins out there, and they still manage to get quite a bit of damage off on him. And he's a very fragile card overall, so that's not a good thing. I think that if Magic Archer could one-shot Spear Goblins, even if he had a slightly slower firing rate, that would help him out a lot. It would kind of help to balance the Spear Goblins a bit too, because they're getting kind of annoying with the Goblin Huts and Goblin Gangs being rampant right now in tournaments. I think that'd be a nice card. What do you think?
I agree with you on Magic Archer. I think that Magic Archer, you don't want to buff it too much because a lot of pros already swear that he's one of the best cards in the game, right? So it's, you know, you have to think about the competitive game as well. But at the same time, I agree with you 100% on there is that awkward situation where the opponent has like a Goblin Hut and you're just like, Magic Archer, right? And then it's like, wait, no, he can't hit a damn thing, you know? It's just walking by him and like, you know, like he's not even there. So I actually do agree with you. Even like you said, even if it was a rework to where his aim was a bit better and maybe a little bit slower, I think I would take it. But hey, Woody, again, I have to thank you for coming on. Always appreciate talking to you. After this conversation, I'm like, man, why don't I have him on more often? So thank you so much. What is going on in your world? Are you casting, hosting any events? Have any stream plans coming up that we should know about?
I'm actually not going to be streaming for the next couple of weeks, but I do want to say thanks real quick to Royale API for providing the data for the card popularity snapshot. Very helpful, and being able to put that together, courtesy of those guys. I do stream typically on twitch.tv/Woody, and you can also find me over on Twitter at Woody_CR, hoping to get some good news soon on CRL and looking forward to the Combine event. So keep an eye out for great things to come in Clash Royale esports. Just not able to announce anything with my involvement yet.
Okay, sounds good, man. We'll be looking forward to the news. Thanks again for coming on, man.
Appreciate it, Ash.
No problem, guys. That's going to do it for today's video. Let me hear your thoughts. What do you think of the current meta? Do you agree with our card assessments? I'm pretty sure a lot of you won't because that's the trend on these balance update videos. But guys, we will 100% be getting balance changes with the update. Supercell has confirmed that, so I'm not sure if it would be the same day, but it likely would be the same, you know, few days or weeks or whatever. So let me know what your biggest nerf and buff should be in the comments below. Also, huge shout out to Bren Chong, my YouTube partner. Check out his information along with my guest Woody's, along with a link to the card popularity snapshot on Reddit. Make sure you guys check it out, see the full text of all the card usage data and everything, as well as Woody's lovely write-up. So again, check out Woody's information in the description, as well as his player profile on Stats Royale. And thanks so much for watching. As always, take care, guys.